Hello, everybody. Welcome back to 40 Fever. Hope you guys are doing well. We're back. I mean, I think I sort of alluded to it on the last podcast that we'd neither have done something because it was FA Cup week last week, or we just had a week off, and we actually just chose the latter. And I'm sort of glad we had that week off because I was far from impressed from my experience in the FA Cup, losing with the greatest respect to Wilston, a part-time team. I lost my head. I think it's become pretty accustomed to that. I mean, we're joined by Kieran and Jake. Kieran didn't have the best experience in the FA Cup, although they did lose. No real shame in losing to a league above, and Jake's a little bit happy for the fact that they're in the next round and they haven't drawn Peterborough. Lads, how are we?
I don't like football anymore. This isn't even like out of a recent result thing. I don't know what it is. We played 15 games. I'm worn out. It can't keep going on like this, can it? Just terrible, disgraceful stuff. Jokes aside, all good, apart from the whole football thing.
Good stuff. Jake, how's things?
Been better. Obviously, yesterday, half 12 kickoff, get there earlier, and then you lose 1-0 to the side who are 23rd in the league is far from ideal. But we're in the second round of the cup at least.
Yeah, I mean, you've got that. Imagine not beating Carlisle. God. We'll crack on with things. Interesting as always. Obviously, we've had that week away from League Two action. We're back to the somewhat bread and butter, as it were. We should probably start with Port Vale. Top of the league. Absolutely fine. I think there were 10 games unbeaten. I think they won the last 5. Darren Moore, manager of the month, and of course that's come back to be a curse, hasn't it? As an out of form Gillingham, having lost 5 of their last 6 games in League Two, come out with a 1-0 victory at Priestfield Stadium. Jacob Clark with the winning goal on 79 minutes. So look, we've been on about Port Vale quite a long time, for the fact that they just look the team to beat at the minute. Turns out they are human, losing to Gillingham, who have not had the best of times at the minute. I think it's probably fair to say, but I think in terms of a win, I think winning 1-0, probably not the most convincing, but again, they're top of the league, and we know that Gills can be a good side in this division. We've seen it early on with the start they've made. Before this sort of like form in which they've hit, you've got to put that down as a terrific result for Gills, and certainly one in which they hugely needed.
I mean, they did hugely need it. I think they had that almost spiral that they had last season, right, where they kind of started off well, but they had that period of about 2-3 months where they kind of dropped off and they weren't able to kind of bounce back from it. They were too far behind. And we always say when one of the big teams lose, it's important to see how they respond and if they can get back to winning ways. And that's not exactly went to plan for Gillingham. Be honest with you, looking at this game from a stats perspective, I wouldn't imagine it was a thriller. 10 total shots, Port Vale with none on target, Gillingham with 1 on target, which of course ended up to be the winner. So not the most, I wouldn't imagine, convincing performances, but like you mentioned, they're top of the league. Port Vale are the team to beat. And if I'm not mistaken, isn't that 2 manager in the months in a row for Darren Moore? So it's I'd like to say it is. If not, I think there's a good argument to say that he's been probably the best manager in the league, regardless, probably since the start of the season with how Port Vale have done. But yeah, as we always mention, when every manager or someone along those lines gets a reward, a curse ends up happening the following game. So that's how it's turned out. But yeah, I think that's a vintage Gillingham performance, one that you expect. Very little shots, but they take them where they can.
Yeah, I didn't think it was ever going to be one just full of entertainment. I think the stat shows just the 1 shot on target all game from a total of 9 shots, and I mean that shot on target actually resulting in a goal. Look, I think we've gone on about Gillingham. I think as we've mentioned, I think it was needed. I think that win, because I think we're starting to get to a period where if they keep like losing, I think in ways that they have done at the minute, you're plummeting down the table very quickly, and it's clear to see that. I mean, Gillingham back. I mean, they're up to 8th now. They're still a point outside the playoffs, but compare that to the start that they did have. It's been a little bit of a concern. You probably saw like the first couple of defeats they had to Grimsby and Crewe, and you're thinking, right, okay, this might be a little bit of a blip. And then they ended up losing to lost to Accrington, lost to Bradford, and lost to Newport. I was like, that's not really a blip now. It's sort of getting to a little bit of concerning territory. Then drew to Swindon, where they were 1-0 up until like very late on, which felt like, well, it felt like a defeat. I think you probably ask any Gillingham fan, they'll probably agree. But home soil, we've been pretty used to seeing Gillingham be very solid on home soil, and they've come away with a victory, albeit probably not the best of games we'll see, but the 3 points is all that matters to them. Just a quick one on Port Vale. They have been beaten. Not very often we say that, but still top of the table at the minute. 3 points clear ahead of Walsall in second. I personally don't think it's too much of a bad thing. I think their next task is to respond from that. They've got next. I think it's probably a brilliant opportunity to get back to winning ways, isn't it?
Yeah, that's absolutely what I was going to say. They've played 15 games. They're top of the league. They've got 30 points. I think they're definitely allowed to lose one game. So they've got Morecambe up next. I'm sure they'll respond perfectly fine.
It's a great opportunity with the way Morecambe are at the minute as well. And I don't think, I think just one of those days, just not much really sort of seems to click. I think, teams can have them. I don't think it'd be much of a concern at the minute. I mean, they've got a brilliant opportunity to get back to winning ways. I mean, but I think this run as well, I mean, truly terrific stuff. I think you clearly see that more or less over that period, see that Port Vale look the strong side. I think people expected. I didn't think they'd probably be somewhat clear, maybe at the top, certainly in and around there, I'd say. But a lot of credit has to go to Darren Moore for the run. I mean, the players have been terrific. They picked up some excellent wins in that time. I think it just seemed the case, maybe just one game too far for that. But it happens. It's just about how they respond now in their next game. But a much needed win for Gillingham, I think, is all that's really needed to be safe for that one. Doncaster 1, Notts County 1. We'll move on to this one. Two sides who are at the top end of the table. Currently, Notts County are third, Doncaster are fourth. Notts County took the lead in this one. A lovely goal, by the way, from Lozana Jatta. The whole team move. Certainly worth a watch if you haven't seen it. I think if it gets scored I think I tweeted it on the account earlier. If it gets scored in the Premier League, it's going on. People are talking about that for a little bit. It was a truly terrific goal. I think it's somewhat shows where Notts County are. That the fact that they look a real serious team. But so did Doncaster with the character they showed to get the equaliser in there. Joe Ironside with a header of his own. One apiece in this one against two very good sides. From it, look at it. I mean, Doncaster had 10 more shots compared to Notts County for judging by stats. But I think personally, I just think it's a good result all around. I mean, none of them have lost. I think either of them would have been happier with the win, especially in Notts County's case being winning at the time. I think Doncaster might be happy that they've got something from the game. Yeah, it's an interesting one to pick out. I just think it's a solid result all around, if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think either team are going to be too mad with that. I think the one thing we questioned about Notts County in particular, of course, they lost Jody Jones to injury, and we questioned if they were going to be able to almost, bounce back from the massive outlet they lost. And I think it did take them a little while just to kind of readjust to that, but. Like you mentioned, the goal they scored, it's an entire teamwork move. It's no individuals. That team is working as a unit, which I don't think we saw too much of last season. It was a lot of Langstaff and Jody Jones kind of running the show for them. But you've got to give Doncaster the credit as well. Not only did they, of course, come back against, weirdly, a decent Notts County side defensively, but they put a lot of pressure on them, and they definitely could have justified probably being the better of the two sides throughout the 90 minutes. But yeah, I think overall neither team are going to overly complain. I think if you're gonna make the argument of which team are potentially the more upset of the two, you maybe go Doncaster for how they played throughout the entire game, and of course the fact they were on home soil. That it actually looked a really promising game, and one that really captured how quality both of these sides are.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with you there in parts. I think Notts County. I mean, we've seen that Notts County are a good team. They're an even better team away from home. I think I'm right in saying they haven't lost away from home yet, which is a somewhat a good omen to have. I think they maybe would have liked a couple more, but they're not losing games. I think that's the main thing. I'm just under the impression that maybe they're slightly disappointed. I think Doncaster had at times better of the players, certainly had more shots, more efforts. But I don't think they're both. I just see it as they're both in pretty good positions in the table. They're both third and fourth respectively, both on 27 points. And you mentioned about the loss of Jody Jones, and maybe it might have taken a bit of time. Yes, I agree. I think, but I didn't think it'd hammer them too much, to be honest, because I think the squad, they've got some really good players for this team, but obviously you can't really recreate, the talent of what Jody Jones has, really, because I'd probably go as far to say he's the best player in League Two. I think he's that good. But you still got players like Dan Crowley who are phenomenal, and a couple of others like that. Alessandro Jatta's still bagging in the goals. He looks like a real handful. He's having a very good season himself. They've just got good players all around, and they certainly look like promotion material at the minute. Quick one on Doncaster. I mean, they haven't lost a game. I mean, they've done well to get the point out of that. They're on a decent run of form, maybe in all comps, certainly in the league. I mean, I'm just looking at it now. They have won like 4 of the last 7, I want to say, in the league. Only losing once in that time. They're on a decent run of form at the minute. I look at their next games as well. They've got Salford next, probably not a good time to for you to come up against them. And then they've got Carlisle. I think if you're Doncaster, I think you certainly back yourselves against those two teams.
Yeah, they'll expect themselves to win and get a good result against both sides. But it's a really good start. They just need to keep getting more wins and keep the pressure on Notts County and Port Vale and also Walsall, who are up there. Because they do want to win the league, they do want to get in the top 3, and it's not going to be easy. So as long as they keep winning and keep putting that pressure on, they've got a hell of a chance.
For sure. And I'd go as far to say that I think if we're judging from a Grimsby perspective, here we go again. I think they've been the best team we've played this year. I think for quite a distance. I think the way that they get numbers up there at rapid pace. I mean, with the players that they've got that could hurt you, Gibson, Molyneux. I mean, Billy Sharp has got goals. So do the likes of Ironside. They've got a really good team, and I'll be amazed if they're anything less than, well, if they're outside the playoffs at the end of the season, because I think they're certainly a good team. But so do Notts County. I think it did seem a little bit predictable, if I'm going to be honest, the result, but I honestly don't think too many can have complaints, especially if we look at it from a bigger picture where both are at the minute. I don't think it's the worst result in the world. A good win for MK Dons. It's a shame that Luke's not here, actually. Obviously, losing to AFC Wimbledon in the FA Cup last week. I sort of did wish we made a podcast just to laugh at that. We might have lost to Wealdstone, but that was funnier. Seeing Luke's reaction in particular was great viewing. Even on I saw he was involved in a YouTube video as well. And let's just say he made a few friends from that one in the comment section. But no, they came up against Swindon this one now under the management of Ian Holloway. It was his first league game in charge. All these men make the perfect start to the game, scoring inside 20 seconds, and then I think I did see it. I did sort of see it come. I think MK Dons just sort of ramped it up a little bit and scored 3 goals. I do maybe question the goalkeeping for the first one, the way he just parried it. Second one was a bit scrappy from Luke's love friend MJ Williams. Actually, I'll come on to what Luke has said actually about him in a minute. And then obviously the third goal from Alex Gilby, in which brilliant cross from Aaron Namain. Good win for MK Dons. Again, keeps up their fine form.
Yeah, it's a good win, and MK had a relatively difficult start to the season. Of course, Scott Lindsay's now taken the helm, and we kind of know the qualities he's got at this level of what he did with Crawley, and you'd imagine that MK have a lot more kind of facilities. You definitely look at their squad and go, it's probably a better one than Crawley's were, and with their credit, they're winning the games that you expect them to win. I think that in a Swindon perspective, the one positive I think that they can take from it is that as much as they were second best of the entire game, I thought that there have been games this season where you knew Swindon were going to lose. You know, they didn't have anything throughout the game. And I'm not saying Swindon played the better football, but they created chances where needs be. But there's definitely a good few issues that we always mention with them, and particularly for, like you mentioned, 2 out of 3 of their goals could have probably been defended better. But yeah, I don't think even Swindon will be too mad with that result. MK are a good side. They're managed by a really quality manager at this level, and it's something that they, you know, if they can beat if they can play like that rather against some of the teams maybe closer to them in the table with not the immediate quality MK have, they may be able to compete a little bit better and potentially get some results to look towards the right end of the table. But yeah, like you mentioned, it's a good result for MK, and it's definitely something that, you know, that they'll keep building on as the weeks progress.
Yeah. I'll touch on a little bit more about MK in a minute, but this is what Luke said. Praise be MJ Williams, our Lord and Saviour, destroyer of Swindon. And he also put in a formal apology into the group chat yesterday because we know that how much he loves him. I'm tempted for Christmas to get him like an MJ Williams MK Don shirt. I reckon that would be great. Just something nice towards Luke's favourite player. You know?
I think what he'd also like is an AFC Wimbledon shirt. We'll see how it goes. You know, we of course know that he had donated to their pitch reconstruction, so I'm sure that he'll absolutely love a AFC Wimbledon shirt too. So there's a couple Christmas presents on your way, Luke, mate.
Yeah, us being friendly, we're good friends here. But going back to the football, I think if we're looking at MK Dons, I honestly didn't think they needed much doing. I think obviously the Mike Williamson departure to Carlisle obviously played at all, but I think they picked the perfect man in Scott Lindsay. I sort of saw that appointment coming. I think from the off, actually, when Williamson did leave, and it's turning out really well. I just think they needed that little bit extra motivation, which was something you definitely wasn't getting under Williamson. Lindsay just looks like he's making them work a little bit harder. I think he's maybe too hard at times, but I think, we know that, MK Dons were coming into this season, as red hot favourites to absolutely walk the league. I think for some people, obviously the start of the season didn't happen. He's moved on. It was a change, and they've sort of found their feet ever since. Obviously, the FA Cup defeat last week was a disappointment, but if we're looking at it in the league, 4 straight victories for them, and they're up into the playoffs. And they're starting to look like the side in which I think we probably expected from them heading into this season. I think for Swindon, I think it's sort of a case of, I think maybe they accepted it. I think they maybe accepted that. I don't think they'd have got much from the game, if I was going to be honest, against the MK Dons in particular, but especially on the form that they're going at the minute. I think it was always going to be a tough ask for Holloway and his men. But what I see key are Swindon's next few fixtures, because I think they're huge. I want to point out a few of them. Their next few games in the league, they've got Accrington away, Morecambe at home, Colchester away, Fleetwood at home, Bradford away, and then Grimsby at home just before Christmas. I think it's make or break for them, if I'm going to be honest. I think especially with Carlisle and Morecambe picking up points yesterday, they're sat 22nd. I think these next run of games in particular, I mean, they've got to play Accrington, Morecambe. Colchester aren't doing great. If they can catch Fleetwood on maybe an off day because they've been a bit inconsistent, maybe at times themselves. I think these next few games are key. I think for the season, that it could really tell. If they don't come out with much from that, then I think they could be in trouble.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yesterday went the complete wrong way that Swindon would have liked. Obviously, losing to MK Dons, and everyone around them picked up points and showed some promise. And obviously, with those next games, they've really got to pick up some form. 1 point off the relegation zone, 2 points off the bottom. Big trouble if they don't get that right.
Absolutely, it's key. And we'll see what Ian Holloway does there. I mean, look, it could happen. Look, I've been critical of Holloway from, obviously, I'm not going to go into it, but what I can maybe give him a little bit of credit for was the fact that, when he initially came in, we had a decent start. He gave the whole place a lift. It did sort of seem that at Swindon. I mean, they beat Colchester in the FA Cup I think it was Colchester in the FA Cup last week. But I think, they've got to they need to start getting results in the league. I think it's as simple as that, really. And we'll see if Holloway and the players are up to it. Time will tell on that one. But MK Don's up to 6th with that one. Walsall Crewe, I mean, 2 good sides going at it at the minute. I mean, Crewe have been very impressive as of late. So have Walsall, to be fair. I mean, Walsall, I think Walsall look really good in particular for the teams we played. I say that Doncaster was probably the best team we played. I thought Walsall were probably a close second. Our Lord and Saviour, Omar Bogle, opening the score sheet for Crewe. I miss that man so much, and so does Kieran, I believe, from that reaction. But it's that man again, Nathan Lowe, for the Saddlers. I mean, the points are shared, and nothing to split the sides. It looked like Walsall had the better of the game. Certainly had more shots. The Crewe's going with their only shot on target. I think if we're judging it from that, I think on the face of it, not a bad point. Because I think not a bad point for any team. Because I think for the fact that both teams are doing well at the minute. I mean, Walsall up in 2nd, Crewe are 5th. But I think if we're just looking from on it on paper alone with that, I do sort of maybe get the impression from that Walsall might be a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, potentially. I don't think, like you mentioned, it's an overly bad point for either side. I think it is just 2 good sides facing off, and for the most part, other than a few openings, particularly for Walsall, it was 2 teams cancelling each other out. But yeah, if you're looking at it predominantly on stats, Walsall were the better of the 2 sides, and it's bizarre, isn't it? Because I don't think many people would have put Walsall to be at this current position that they're in within the league. But you've got to give them credit for the kind of the way that they go about their work, and the way that they go about every single game is always a team effort. It's, again, not often individuals performing. But yeah, I don't think there's enough to potentially split the game to maybe say Walsall were the better team. I think it was relatively 50-50. But if you are looking at it predominantly on stats and everyone's favourite XG and all that lovely stuff, then maybe a little bit disheartening for Walsall. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad point by any stretch.
Yeah, that's what I was sort of going off just mainly on stats on paper. But I mean, you can read absolutely anything on stats. I mean, it means nothing. The key important thing is putting a goal in the back of the net, and both managed to score 1 apiece. I think, away from home, it's, a point's never a bad result. I do maybe think that maybe Crewe may be the happier, maybe. It's sort of, I think with Port Vale losing, I think, if Port Vale would have won yesterday, it'd sort of put them out of sight a little bit. Obviously, with the results of Walsall and Notts County and maybe even Doncaster, it would have put Port Vale out of sight a little bit. There's still 3 points clear. So it's still, it's not a lot of ground to make up. Port Vale have played the game more compared to Walsall as well, in particular. I think it's a key thing to know. But look, just 2 very good sides, I think at the minute. I think we talked a little bit about Lee Bell at the start of the season. They didn't start great at all. They obviously had that run, and they've not really looked back since then. I mean, Walsall, yeah, I mean, you've mentioned it. Walsall have impressed me. They've really impressed me, because I sort of doubted maybe their goal scoring attributes in particular at the start of the campaign, but there's certainly no problems there at this stage. They're scoring goals and they're winning games, and they're looking absolutely. I've just got a really good blend of players from what I've got in a really good system. They've got a bit of youth experience, a lot of tall guys, some more physical players, some good passes of the ball. They've just got a really good blend, and I really like what Walsall and Matt Sadler have done this year. I just see it as 2 really good sides, actually.
Yeah, I totally agree. Walsall, decent point. If they win their game in hand, they can still go top. Crewe will be happy with a point. Omar Bogle got his first goal, and they are the lowest scorers in the playoffs. So if he can get up and running, which he did a few years ago and we haven't really seen since, then he'll help them push on a lot. So they'll both look at it towards the end of the season as a good point. So we may as well look at that now as a good point.
Yeah, you mentioned the Bogle one. I think it's an interesting one because, I mean, look, he was excellent for us. I love the bloke to bits. I'd probably say it was probably his best time he's had as a footballer. Is probably with us. He's obviously had quite a lot of clubs since then and hasn't really done anything. Sort of found a little bit of a home at Newport where, he was starting to fire again. He had that season, I think he got, was it 17 goals or something like that? He had a very good season. I think in his first one, I think I'm right in saying. But, on his day, he can be a very good striker. I just think one's a couple of things. I just think he needs a little bit of service. I just think he needs that little bit of love. I think that's the sort of play that he thrives on, if I'm going to be honest. But that's just what I think of that. But you can't doubt what either side are doing at the minute, because they're clearly doing something right. You mentioned that Crewe were the lowest scorers in the playoffs. Let's go to the side that have conceded the most in the playoffs. I am talking about my boys, Grimsby Town. A very good away win yesterday. It's becoming the norm, this, actually. 5 away wins in a row, which is very impressive. Even more impressive, going to AFC Wimbledon have won all of their home games so far this season. And we go there and pick up another 1-0 win. Danny Rose with the only goal of the game from the most glorious assist from Kieran Green, I think you will probably see. Honestly, I mentioned the Notts County goal. Just look at this assist from ZineGreen Zidane, Ronaldinho, Kieran Green, yes, whatever you want to call it. The bloke is transformed this season. He is an unbelievable just assist. I think if you're looking at it from an AFC Wimbledon perspective, I think he disappointed in the keeper there. I think he sort of came but didn't eventually. And it's just the natural instincts of Danny Rose just to head that in. But I didn't go to the game. I mean, Wimbledon had a goal chalked off for a foul quite early on. I'll be honest, I didn't think there was much in that. I think we got quite a little bit lucky there. But it sounded like Wimbledon really didn't have that many clear-cut chances. It was once again another excellent defensive performance. And look, 5 wins in a row. We just need to do it at home. And, we could have if we can do that, if we shore up our home form a little bit, honestly, who knows where the season can take us? But 5 wins in a row, that's impressive, isn't it?
You're making that question to where I have to say yes.
Yes.
No, but yes.
I will do stuff if you say no.
Listen, all right. I will get rid of my. I'm not going to praise any more Grimsby because Jordan's ego is already up here. And when you're winning 5 away games in a row, especially off of, again, the relatively tough season you had last time out, and the inconsistent patches of form you've had, particularly at home, it is impressive. And I think the thing that you've got, we've said this exact term a few times during this podcast, is that you work really well as a team. It really kind of fluctuates well from the defense to the midfield to those attacking players. And I think that's probably what you expect from a David Artell kind of side. You expect it to be a well-oiled unit, and you've had injuries and all that kind of stuff, and you've come through that on the right end of it. So no, it's another impressive result, and I can't say that Grimsby being in the playoffs 15 games into the season was on my 2024 bingo card. But that being said, I will just bring the tone down a little bit. Unfortunately, you play us next week, and we're quite good at ending the whole teams on good runs. So not even out of hey, we're playing really well, we're going to beat you. It's just how we roll. So
yeah, did it with Stockport last season. You did it with Crewe this season. I'm not looking forward to this one. We don't have the best of. We don't have the and Doncaster. Yeah.
And this
we don't have
to, as well, yeah. Guys, yeah. we're just good at making other teams feel horrible. All those
we don't have the best of records at Newport. Full stop. Just very quickly, just a couple of things I just want to point out. I mean, we've obviously mentioned about our home form. That needs to change because especially recently that's been dire. We need to try and somewhat emulate some of those away performances into at home. But also, I mean, it's another 1-0 win in which, we sort of like defended for our lives. I mean, they're great and all. I mean, if you can go win 1-0 away from home, put in a very good defensive performance like we did against Gillingham, like we did against Salford, somewhat Tranmere as well, although they didn't really offer anything. They're really good wins. I'm not sure how long it's sustainable, though. I think the next step, is going to be a time in which teams are going to find out what we do. And, it's not always going to be like that. So maybe we look at it, we try, maybe try and get another goal, maybe try and maybe win games a little bit more comfortably if we can. But, I think, we struggled to, really put games to bed this season. But you're not complaining about, the winning run that we have been on. It's just, so hopefully we just try and stop these inconsistencies in which we do have, because our home and away form are very different. It's as clear as that, and we're loving life away. Ultimately we need to see some wins at home. And I think if we do that, who knows? I think we could be in a shout for at least challenging for a playoff spot. I really do believe that. We just need to. I just don't think we're far off at all. But no, really pleased from that. It's a tough place to go. It's the old cliche, but AFC Wimbledon is, and they look a really good team themselves. I mean, they've got a load of games in hand. I think, for a defeat yesterday, I think they're first at home this season. They've got 3 games in hand. I think the more games they lose, actually. I think, maybe yesterday. I think, if I'm going to be honest, I think not panic stations just yet. They've played 12 games, but I think there's more as time maybe goes on. Maybe they don't win. I think those games in hand might become crucial. And it's certainly big for them, I think, if they want to be up there. Let's say they win those 3 games in hand, 22-25, they'll be on 28 points. They'll go second. I mean, they could be big anyway, but I think it could be even more big if they do go and lose games. But I think from looking at it, it just seemed like one of those days for them.
Yeah, it was one of those days, and a really good performance by Grimsby, just seeing out the game as well. They're just a little bit inconsistent, Wimbledon. They've got Barrow up next, who aren't on the best of form. So that and their game in hand, if they win all of them, then there's absolutely no bother at all for them. They just need to make sure that they aren't this little run of losing games and not being consistent stops as soon as possible.
Yeah, of course. Imagine not beating AFC Wimbledon. God, it's who'd have thought? I mean, a certain team have already played them twice in all comps and have lost both of them.
What's Toronto?
Not too sure. I just wish someone was here to listen to it. So, look, we're in the playoffs. It's great. It's another week in which I'm going to enjoy. Let's head towards the relegation somewhat battle at the minute. Big wins for both teams at the weekend with Morecambe winning very late at Carlisle. Morecambe winning very late at Harrogate, and Carlisle winning very late at Salford. We'll just get the one at Salford out of the way. A 1-0 victory for Carlisle very late from a Ben Barkley header. Come on, and Jake, what did you make of that then? Because it didn't sound like you were very pleased with the performance from that one.
No, we had the better of the first half, but just like that, our whole season's gone, just couldn't score. And then the second half, the same problem. Carlisle were probably slightly better in terms of that second half. And the longer it goes on, you just know what's going to happen. And then a corner goes in and it falls to the back post and Carlisle score. And, oh, look, we've lost to 23rd in the league. Whoop. So that was pretty fun. But Carlisle looked a lot better. They started to play the football that Williamson did at MK Dons last season. So as long as they keep that going and actually back up this win with more wins on the board, then they can bring themselves out of trouble and can probably start to climb up the league, but it's too early to say that just yet.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think, the bodies behind the goal were looked really good. And look, I said, I think before, we sort of had this break from our last podcast, I saw this game, I think in particular, that I think Carlisle had to win. I think especially in the grand scheme of things, that the fact that Morecambe have won as well. I think if they'd have not won the game, they'd have been gone bottom of the league and already quite a fair bit adrift. I mean, they lost to Wigan in the FA Cup last week. From reading from what I saw from their fan base, a much better performance. And not really much of a shame in losing to a League One team. Although it looked like he had the better. I mean, it sounded like Sam Tickle, the Wigan goalkeeper, like he had an absolute blinder in that one. But it was a game. I've always felt that Harrogate. No, not quite yet. That Carlisle had to win. And they've gone on that, albeit late. Certainly didn't look like the most vintage of performances. But I think for probably where they are at the minute, the fact that they have lost a hell of a lot of games already, with somewhat this losing mentality and the pressure building on Mike Williamson, it's about getting the points by hook or by crook, and they certainly did that yesterday.
I think the thing that we've questioned with Carlisle, and it's almost been built over the past, you maybe say, season and a third now, that they've, of course, almost become accustomed to losing most games, most weeks. And albeit they've had a new manager, that takes a while, of course, especially with how different Williams' style of football is to the style of football that they were playing beforehand. I think they almost had to break that cycle of kind of being accustomed to losing week in, week out. And, it sounds quite, I suppose, cliche because you've got new players and new management and everything, but there's almost that potentially thing in the back of your mind where it's become so accustomed that you're almost used to losing. So it's definitely about now. They've got a win on the board. If I'm not mistaken, it's the first one under Mike Williamson that I'm aware of. I might be wrong.
I believe it was his second win because he beat Swindon in his first game.
Oh yes, yeah. But yeah, I think it's just something now that it's not a vintage performance, but they did enough to get the 3 points, and it's just about building on it. And like you mentioned, it was vitally important that they won this one because all the teams kind of around them, bar Swindon, I've kind of been picking up points where they've kind of needed to in games you maybe expect to be competitive. So it's just about them building on from it now.
Yeah, of course. Great win for them as away days go. It's just what you need. It's just, as you've mentioned, it's about backing it up. They've got Bromley next, in which is it's certainly winnable. I think they've got to go into it with an open mind, and hopefully that has given them, I think, the lift that they probably needed. I think it is a confidence booster more than anything as well for this one. But yeah, like we've mentioned, vitally important they won that because they'd have been quite a fair bit adrift if they didn't win that already, and we're starting to get concerned, and even more questions would have been asked on Mike Williamson. Look, we've talked about this to death. I wasn't sure about the appointment at the time, and it was sort of proven right a little bit, but we need to see if they can back it up. That's the most important thing that they need to do right now, really. But it's a win in which they hugely needed, no doubt about that. It's a hugely needed win for Morecambe. They left it later at Harrogate. The late goal for Harvey McAdam right at the end. It was they just caught Harrogate just playing from the back, like in the 95th minute. I'm a bit baffled why, really. Reece Williams with the header to give Morecambe the lead, the former Liverpool defender, might say. James Daly equalised, but look, it's a win for Morecambe. It's I want to say their second win of the season, both coming away from home. They did beat Barrow away, and again leaving it as late as they did do. And obviously, they saw the results of Carlisle winning and Harrogate. Well, Carlisle winning and Swindon losing eventually in the end. It still somewhat puts them back into it, and it's great for them. Of course, they've won it. I think it's similar to Carlisle. I think they need to back it up.
Yeah, I think I've said this many a times on the podcast that Morecambe have been unlucky in certain games that they've lost. They've made one mistake, not taken chances, or things just haven't quite fallen their way. But I think in recent weeks we've kind of more seen the problems with them on the pitch. We've seen games where they have been kind of blown out the water as you'd potentially expect, given all the things that are going on at the club and everything. But I feel that if any manager on the planet is going to somehow save Morecambe from what everyone thinks is inevitable relegation, it's Derek Adams. You look at the table now; they're on 10 points. They go and win next week. You put it towards, of course, Swindon and Carlisle dropping points, and there is the potential for them to be out of the relegation zone. They're 5 points off of being towards 19th, 20th. So it's, again, something that they do need to build on. And I'm sure they wouldn't have wanted to leave it as late as they did, but No, I don't think again, it's one that you can't complain with, and it's just about them building on it now and proving some of the qualities that they do have, because there are some talented players within that squad.
Yeah, they'll certainly take it. I did look at their next game, actually. I mean, it's probably not the best time to play Port Vale in the league after them losing. They'll want a response. But I see the game that they've got. I see the games they've got after that. They've got Swindon, Tranmere, and Grimsby after the next three. I mean, there's possibilities for points there if they can just somehow get it right. But yeah, I just feel like I feel like for Harrogate in particular as well, I feel a little bit different with them this year. I feel like they're like Swindon a little bit. They're finding ways to ridiculous ways to lose games, and it's really shooting themselves in the foot. And to be fair, I mean, they're a little bit adrift at the minute. They're in 20th. They're 4 points clear of Carlisle in 23rd. But I mean, it's still quite a fair bit of football to play. But I think it's becoming evident. They're sort of, I say maybe sleepwalking a little bit, because I think Harrogate have sort of built themselves to be not the most prettiest of sides, just sort of there at times, although they had a decent period last season which it looked like they could make the playoffs. But I think just Harrogate have just sort of made a spot their own, but it certainly looks to be the case in which I think they're struggling. I think they're struggling quite massively at the minute.
Yeah, it feels like they're slowly drifting towards the bottom of the table, which they are 20th. They don't look as bad as we've seen other teams that are below them are. But their next three are Chesterfield, Gillingham and Salford, which is not the easiest of three games. And you'd really need them to pick up points just to avoid falling even further. Because usually they are a tough side to beat, but they're not showing that this season. They're giving away really poor goals, like you said. They're not scoring that many either, so they're quite a bit of a concern at the minute.
Yeah, that last goal in particular, I'd be livid if I was a Harrogate fan. They're trying to play about from the back in your own box in the 95th minute, where just get it up the pitch. Even if you don't go on and properly attack, you could be playing it into danger, and that's exactly what they did. And they shot themselves in the foot right at the end. They're their own worst enemy. That's as much as I'll probably say on that. We'll head on to the other games. Accrington Stanley, what a victory for them at Chesterfield yesterday, coming out 3-0 winners. We've said that Chesterfield are maybe a little bit inconsistent, but they're not losing many games. It's more just win-draw, quite a lot of draws in that period. I don't think this was a result that many people saw coming. I think it's fair to say it's a brilliant victory for Accrington Stanley.
It's a very good victory, and I'd like to kind of point out one player that they've got that I've been really impressed with watching in recent weeks, and he was one of the goal scorers, and that's being Josh Woods. He came off in the, if I'm not mistaken, it was either towards the end of the first half or it was the beginning of the second half. But I think in particular, his finish, albeit he can't really miss from the position he's in. He's literally probably about 2 yards out from the line. It's harder to miss that than to score it. But that team, within their credit, they're finding ways to get into pockets of space and take chances where they need to. I think the issue we've had with kind of reviewing Accrington is that they've done all right offensively. They've got players there to create problems to an opposition, but sometimes they overcommit and they leave themselves very vulnerable to concede on the counter, or sometimes they don't clear their lines well enough. And I think that's probably the perfect example of what Accrington can do if everything clicks, because I didn't really think, and you can kind of see this from the stats, I don't really think Chesterfield were overly in it either. Don't get me wrong, they had a few chances, as you'd expect them to at home with the players that they've got. But I think it is a generally really deserved Accrington win. And we were talking about them potentially being one of the relegation favourites, if you want to put it that way. And albeit I think it's justified, but they're sitting relatively pretty, I suppose. 18th, 5 points clear of the drop. And I think when you look at their fixtures, they've got Swindon next, Wimbledon, Bradford. There's games there that are winnable. There are games that they can pick up points in, and who knows if they can play with the overall intent that they want, they could be looking, towards securing themselves mid-table and building on from there.
Yeah, I mean, I look at their results in particular. They have, from what I've seen, they've won 4 of the last 6 league games, and they've drawn 1. That's one, and they've lost the other. The loss coming to MK Dons. So they sort of, it took them a hell of a lot of time to get going. I think it's probably fair to say. But it's sort of really finding their stride now. I think maybe it was just that one result, that one victory against Morecambe, which was huge at the time, by the way, has somewhat kicked them up a gear. I think it's probably fair to say. But I mean, it's certainly a shock, actually. The fact they've gone to Chesterfield, one of the better sides in this league, and they don't lose many games. They certainly don't concede a lot of goals, and they've gone and won odds of scoreline, I suggest, quite comfortably in the end. I mean, look, you've mentioned they've not had much issue with scoring goals. As you probably mentioned that they overcommit at times. I probably tend to agree, but they can score goals, and I think if I'm looking at it maybe from a Chesterfield side, albeit they were unbeaten for quite a large period, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, unbeaten in their last 8 with three of those being wins. I think maybe if they'd lost a game, maybe a close game, it's just like, right, okay, fair enough. This stuff happens. I just maybe see this as a scoreline as this is a different defeat. I'm not sure. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it's the fact that they've lost 3-0 to albeit an Accrington side that's got better recently. But let's call a spade a spade. They're not the best of sides in this league. If I'm going to be completely honest, they're certainly not in a bad position in the league. Chesterfield are 2 points away from the playoff places, sitting in 9th, but I just think it's a little bit of a different maybe defeat than maybe some of the ones that they have had at the minute.
Yeah, one thing we have seen from Chesterfield is that they do tend to drop points against sides that you don't expect them to. They drew to Colchester, Bromley, Cheltenham and Salford, which are games that you'd expect them to win. And you see yesterday and you think, oh, they'll probably win that, and then they go and lose 3-0. As much as you can say it's a good result for John Doolan and Accrington, there is probably questions that needs to be asked, because I'm not sure how they let that happen. You'd expect them to just control the game like they did many times last season against sides that were worse than them. So it's a bit of a strange result.
I think, look, like as I've mentioned, I think if they'd lost a game like 1-0, it's like fine, fair enough, it happens. I just think this is just a little bit of a different result. Where maybe thinking, oh, hold on a minute, this doesn't look good. That's just sort of the impression I get. I'm not being overly critical for the fact they're still in a decent position in the league, and they clearly can win games. They do need to convert some of those draws that they have had into wins. I think certainly killing teams off has seemed to be a big weakness for them at the minute, but. Yeah, they are a good team, no doubts about it. But I'm a bit iffy with that result from a Chesterfield perspective, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. But look, as we've mentioned, that's a fantastic victory for Accrington. It sort of keeps their good run of form going. It sort of moved them a fair bit away from the danger zone, as it were, in which somewhat, if we'd have said 5 games ago, they looked like one of the ones that would be right in the thick of it. A lot of credit has to go to John Dillon. They've certainly pulled away that a little bit. We'll run through these last few games pretty quickly. I'm just conscious of time, trying to make it under an hour, which we've started to do a little bit. We're trying to be a little bit more behaved. As a podcast, notice how I've not said any swear words yet. I'm trying to be a little bit more professional, which has not been in my DNA at all. Tranmere 2, Newport 1. Sorry, Kieran, we've got to talk about it. Tranmere struggling for goals. I mean, they have been all season. I feel like they've just doubled their tally for the season just in this game. That's what it feels like. But certainly, I think a much needed win for them. I think if you're a Tranmere fan, I think you're probably happy that they've scored more than 1 goal in a game. Didn't quite keep the clean sheet. Big old Carl Hudlin with another goal to him. Probably the most pleasing aspect on another disappointing afternoon for Newport.
I'll be honest with you, and I'm going to get this kind of done quick, not because I don't like talking about losses. It's whatever. It's just kind of a reality of it's same old in these kind of away fixtures for us. First goal is entirely made. It's Connor Jennings. He scores against us every time. Kind of expected. It's written in the stars in that regard. It's made off of a mistake by Kieran Brennan. He's trying to pass it back to Nick Townsend. not hit it with enough force. Connor Jens is literally just one-on-one with Townsend, and he slots it in the back of the net. Second goal within the credits, a really good delivery into the box. Header's caught on. It's saved well by Townsend, but it's parried out to Kieran Morris, who kind of just taps it into an empty net. Like you mentioned, Kyle Hudlin scored. As you'd expect, being 6'9", it's a header from a set piece. What else would you expect? And then 92 minutes in, which within our credit, we were trying our hardest to push for an equaliser within the 6 minutes of added time or whatever we had. I think it got to a point where we overcommitted. Kyle Jameson was the last man back, and he's kind of just yanked his opposition attacker down. He's got a second yellow. That's a second red this season. Overall, a relatively poor night, as you'd expect. I think good parts. Shane McLaughlin's back from his injury, made a cameo for albeit about 20 seconds maybe. But it's nice to see him back, and I guess we had that resilience to try and come back from it. But I did message this when we were about 20 minutes into the game. I wasn't convinced by Tranmere, and even after they had taken that 2-goal lead and looked okay offensively, I'm not overly convinced that they'll do too much this season, within all honesty. But yeah, it's a good result for them, and I'm sure they won't complain. And if they can build on it from an offensive point of view, they might be a half all right team.
I'm under the same impression with Tranmere. I just don't think they offer maybe too much confidence that they'll really kick on. Like I said, I think they're missing that. They're missing quality, I think, is their main thing. And yeah, I think if we're looking at it from a form perspective, they've lost 3 of their last 4 before this one. So maybe it was a crucial win. But look, I just don't think they're going to do anything this season. It'd be interesting to see if the takeover does happen there. And we'll see what happens, especially in terms of Nigel Atkins. I want Nigel to turn it. Yeah, I like Nigel. But that's
really
full. Yeah, I like Nigel. But no, we were full of praise for him, obviously, early on when we did the ranking of managers pod. But it's just not really happened from this season. Maybe circumstance maybe got in the way. Maybe 1 or 2, of departed, which he maybe. I mean, look, we've mentioned to death, how much of a big loss of is the player that had it from Blackpool. His name escaped me, and it's really annoying. That's the one. But yeah, I mean. I think maybe sucked into maybe the Tranmere hype, to be honest. It's just a bit flat. I think flat is probably how I describe Tranmere at the minute. And Newport are just very inconsistent. I think it's probably that's probably the word to describe us, but they'll take
it's standard.
Yeah. But they'll take 3 points off us next week, because that's just what Newport do with teams on winning runs. We'll do these last 3 games very quickly, because, to be honest, I couldn't really care less. That's just being nice.
I respect the honesty.
Yeah. Fleetwood, they beat Bradford by 1-0. It was a penalty. Good win for them. I mean, Bradford have been on a fair bit of fine form of late, back-to-back defeats in the league for them, albeit lost to Doncaster last time out. Didn't look the best of the games. The game decided by a penalty, but a much-needed win. I think maybe to keep up with the pack, isn't it, for Fleetwood, isn't it, Jake? Especially as I'm looking at it, actually, that's they hadn't won in their last 4 with 2 defeats and 2 draws. So yeah, certainly a much needed win if we're looking at it from that.
Yeah, it's an impressive performance by Fleetwood, because what they've not done in recent games is see it out and get a clean sheet and win comfortably, which they haven't managed to do. Which obviously they'll be wanting to turn that around. They've got a lot of injuries defensively, which won't help them. So to get a clean sheet is big. Bradford have had 16 shots, so it certainly looked like they were the better side. And obviously now they fall out the playoffs and go to 10th. So they need to respond. But overall, it's a good win for Fleetwood.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's another one in which Bradford, it's just one of those days. I think, they've been on a decent reform at the minute. Albeit they've now lost the last 2. I mean, their next game's against Colchester. Certainly a good opportunity to get points on the board there, with the way that Colchester are going at the minute. But I think certainly much needed for Fleetwood, especially with the run that they've been on in the league, and maybe with the amount of injuries that, just to keep up with that with the chasing pack a little bit. I think it's probably because it's sort of maybe already starting to maybe get out of there. But look, I've been high praise with Fleetwood anyway. I think they just need to find that sweet spot. I've always been confident with that because I think they've got one of the best squads in the division. I really do believe that. So, I mean, that's them. We mentioned Colchester, 1-1 draw at Barrow yesterday. Very late point for Colchester to take something from Holker Street. Another goal for Lau Taylor with that Samson to Vide link up working again really well. They look like a real good pair to cancel out that goal from Elliot Newby for the home side. I mean, it'll feel like a defeat for Barrow, the fact they were winning for so long to concede right at the end. Maybe you can maybe argue a foul in the build-up there, but I'll leave you to make your own judgments on that. But ultimately, I think if any other standard, it's a great point away from home for Colchester. Very good point. Quite the distance to travel as well. I just look at it though in the league. They haven't won in their last 7. That's maybe a concerning point to that. But then again, Barrow are not on great form themselves. They've only won 1 of 8. So
games have had a win before this one. So it was 2 teams really out of form, and I think that's been the expected result.
Yeah, pretty much that. Anything from you, Jake, to add to that? I think it's pretty much was expected, actually.
Yeah, it was pretty expected. It was a similar goal that Barrow conceded against Carlisle when they lost 1-0, and it was like, is it a foul? Is it not? They should have learned and just dealt with it a little bit better, so they'll be disappointed, but good point for Colchester.
Yeah, I think if we're looking at the game in isolation, it's Colchester will certainly feel happy with the 2 sides, I think, for that one, with how late it was. And finally, Cheltenham 1, Bromley 1, another 1-1 draw, quite a few from this one. Bromley had 10 men for quite a lot of it, with a second yellow card for former England defender Carl Jenkinson. I somewhat forget that he's there. I mean, Ethan Archer took his goal really well for Cheltenham, and Omar Sawumni's equaliser for Bromley it just seemed very Bromley. It was from a long throw, like sort of recycled and across into the box over to he's a big lad, isn't he? And he's headed that away. But I mean, it's a 1-1 draw. Look, again, if we're looking at stats alone, very even, probably predictable. They're 2 not great sides, if I'm going to be completely honest.
I think you've got to give the credit to Bromley for the fact that they were down to 10 men for so long, yet they kept that really even overall over the 90 minutes. So you definitely imagine Cheltenham would be more upset of the 2 sides. But yeah, like you mentioned, two sides that you wouldn't expect too much from this season. A point apiece. Don't think either of them will be too mad, but I'd imagine Bromley will be, albeit much happier than Cheltenham with the red card taken into account.
Maybe, yeah. I think it's the fact that they held on for quite that time and then they got that goal in the last 10 minutes or so. Actually, just looking at the form table, if we're going on all competitions, I mean, Cheltenham have won 5 of their last 6, which is something that has completely evaded my mind. So actually, if we're judging on it in total, they're on a very good run of form. They've won. I mean, they won 2 and drawn 1 in their last 3, but. I think if you're Bromley, I think you're probably happier just about, especially with 10 men for quite a period from that. I mean, it just seemed very even, and I'm not overly surprised that the points were shared in that one. And that brings the end to this week. It's good to be back, actually, because I don't think you'd have wanted to see me last week because my head was red hot. So thank you guys for listening. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're on YouTube. Make sure you go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. We do really appreciate it. We'll be back next week for another summary of the next round of fixtures, and where I'll be disappointed that our away winning run has come to an end in South Wales. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. Like I've never seen a more certain defeat in my life. But we'll see what happens. Join us again next week. Hopefully we'll have Luke back. It's a shame we didn't have him this week. I wanted to laugh at him.
Missed two AFC Wimbledon games. What a shock.
Yeah.
Make sure you write your thoughts in the comments on that one down below. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said before, we could. I totally forgot. That was a dreadful ending. We'll just leave it there. Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you soon.